come through to the 3 farms, one in Wales, one in Gloucestershire, one here, the first one, the original one all those years ago, which we worked on and worked on. So it's been the story of our life, really. And it's under threat, but it's no different from any other charity, any other business, any other theatre. We're all living through these dark times, trying to find a way through. So we're fundraising like crazy, and trying to keep our spirits up, which they are, longing for the children to come back. We hope sometime, I don't know, January or whenever ever it's going to be possible for them to do so. We've got to be here for them. These are city kids who really need this week in the countryside. It's, the great week of their lives. And I have to say, it's very, very connected to theatre. I think you make yourself available to lots and lots of kids locally, and theatres up and down the country are doing that. It's the most important thing you do. It's the most important thing we do, is to give children an experience, a rich experience, which will enable them to grow into a love of theatre, a love of stories, and in our case, the love of the countryside. And it'll be part of them for the rest of their lives. So we feel it's really, really important. So we're going to hang in there, raise funds, and get there. We've done it before. We had foot and mouth about 20 odd years ago, and we had to shut down for 9 months then. And it looked awful. It looked like a black hole then. And we gradually, our supporters helped us and helped us and helped us. And so we were there 9 months later when the children came, and that's what we want to do again.
I'm sure they'll be coming out to support you in their droves. So for people who don't know Farms for City Children, can you give a brief overview of what the charity does and what the children will experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, they come from cities and large towns from all around the country. And they come for a week, primary school children, up to the age of about 11, sometimes the first year of secondary school, but mostly the last 2 or 3 years of primary school. And they come with their teachers, 35 to 40 at a time, and they live in a large, in this case, the one here in Devon, in a large Victorian manor house, which they think is a palace. And they live in dormitories, and it's comfortable, and they're fed well. But during the day, they're out on the farm. They're up at 7 in the morning, and they're out milking, feeding calves, checking sheep, whatever needs to be done, back for breakfast, out again afterwards to get the horses out, groom them, pick up the eggs. Basically, it's to do whatever needs doing on a mixed farm. It's a mixed farm with some 500 acres with a herd of cows and hundreds of sheep and pigs and oh, goodness knows what. We've got everything here except lions and tigers. And they do everything they can within the bounds of safety to contribute. So it's a working week. It's not a place where you come and you say, isn't it pretty? And here's a clipboard. And how many eggs did you pick up this morning? This is about picking up the eggs. It's about feeding the chickens. And then it's about going out and checking the sheep, lambing sheep. So it's important you do the job properly. You keep your eyes open. You do it whatever the weather. So they experience what farmers experience. And so by the end of the week, they've immersed themselves in this world, totally different world from wherever it is, whether it's Bristol or Manchester or London or wherever. They've immersed themselves in a whole other world, which is their world. That's the whole point of this, is to say to them, look, this is your world as well. It's not better, it's different. This is where your food comes from. And this is where we have to look after the countryside around us. We have to plant trees. We have to grow vegetables. They have to know how it is to make their food. It's in a way trying to give them an understanding of this precious world they live in, because there's no point in saying to children, no, it's really, really important that you save the planet and look after and don't drive your car so much and don't go flying around the world. Why? Why shouldn't we? Well, actually, if you do, you wreck what we've got. And the interesting thing about now, when no one's flying around and hardly anyone's driving around, is just how clear the air is and how loud the birds are singing and how connected we all feel to the landscape. And it makes me cry almost to think of the house up the road empty of children when it should be full. So they come all the way through the seasons. They'll come all the way through the school terms. So we have about 1,000 children a year in each farm. So it's 3,000 children a year. And they come from schools where life can be quite difficult in the surrounding area. So there's not much money. And so we have to find the money, about half of it, to pay for them to come. So we have to raise £1 million every year anyway, just to keep the thing ticking over. And of course, the schools pay the rest. And that's what we're going to be missing at the moment. And that's our problem. So our income is sort of rather reduced, which is why we've got to go out and fundraise like crazy, which is when I finish speaking to you, I shall go and fundraise again.
My question for Sir Michael Morpurgo is, because I've read some of the books and they're brilliant, I wanted to ask, what's your motive to writing a book? What makes you want to get up and really write a book?
The story makes me want to get up and write a book. I have first, of course, to find the story. I think that's really, really important. If there isn't a story and I'm struggling, I really don't want to do it. So what I do is to think it through, dream it through. It's what I call my dream time. And this can take weeks, months, years of not focused thinking, just dreaming it out, weaving it together bit by bit by bit. And then I'll sit down and start writing. And once I've done Once Upon a Time or the equivalent, and I'm really into it, then I want to get up and do it. And if it isn't going well, either I know it's not right and I have to go back and sort of start again, but that happens sometimes. But if I'm on a roll, which I am at the moment, I'm really happy because I get up and I know what I'm going to do. And I usually do about 1,000 words a day. And that's enough because I find it quite tiring these days being 77, or is it 177? I'm not quite sure. Old anyway. And it does mean that you get tired more quickly. So I write up till lunchtime, read it through in the afternoon, correct it, and then I'm ready to go again the next morning.
Just to vouch for Farms for City Children, one of my best friends in the world who grew up in Sydenham, he is a theatrical boy, but his love for you, Michael, doesn't come from your prolific work with theatre or in writing. It comes from Farms for City Children. And when he was in primary school or early secondary school, he came down to the farm in Devon or wherever.
Yeah, we had a school from Sydenham. How lovely is that? That's wonderful. So although I'm a bit miffed. He doesn't think I'm wonderful because of my books, but there we are.
No, he hates your work, but he thinks you're
brilliant.
Oh,
thank you. Actually, what's really the truth is, and you can tell him the best story I've ever written is this place. There's no question about that. It's live, it's real, and it makes a real difference to people's lives. As he will tell you, it is extraordinary what a week can do, or an evening in the theatre. I'm not just claiming this now, or a great book, or these times of intense experience when you're young, the things you just never forget. I mean, teachers have said again and again and again, you can learn more in a week down here than in a whole year at school, and you can learn more going to the theatre for an evening than you can learn the whole time at school. It's the same thing. It's what you don't forget that changes your lives, and that's what. And they don't like it all, and I'm sure in theatre, in some productions, they look away. Oh, no, but they don't forget the moment, And it's the same thing here. When they're having a lamb being born, they see blood. A lot of them don't like to see that. And one may be dead. They certainly don't like to see that. But they don't forget it. This is the first time they've ever had an insight into what birth is about, what life and death are about.
Absolutely. At times it's about putting those textbooks down and getting out and living life. And coming back to lockdown, it's been for us here at the barn and for everyone who is suffering right now with being stuck indoors. Do you think there are major opportunities, thinking about what creativity that could be achieved, whether it's through homeschooling or just a lot of reading, or I think you've heard, was it that Hamlet was written in lockdown? King Lear was written in
well, they were fairly familiar with pestilence in those days. That's for sure. Yes, I mean, I think that the truth is that we have, for the first time in our adult lives anyway, time now to stand and stare, as the poet said. And everything you do, however small and insignificant it is during your day, means much more. You take more time to do it. You think about it more. You've got more time to dream, more time to invent, if you like, to create your own inner life, to think things through. And it seems to me that there is a change coming. The notion that somehow when this is over, we just sort of say, well, that's fine, we'll just go back to where we started. I don't think that's going to be acceptable to anyone.
No.
I think we know that for some strange reason this has happened, but also the great floods have happened. The great storms have happened. The great fires have happened. We know things are out of balance. And we know our own lives have been out of balance. We've been rushed and rushed and rushed. It's rushing there and rushing there. We have needs. Of course we have needs. We need our food and we need friends and all that. But need has been replaced with greed, with this business of chasing things too much. And I think we just are having to learn to slow down and stop it and think and work things through again, the really important things. And what are we discovering? The really important things about caring for other people. Finally, and when any of us ever, we walked out of a hospital, we say thank you to the last person we see and we go. We take it so much for granted, the whole business of what is there for us, whether it is a health service or whether it is a care home or whether it is our food. We take things for granted and we take people for granted. I mean, it's very interesting. It's a little thing that's important. I live down a tiny little lane in Devon. No one comes here at all except us, really, and the swallows. And the dustbin people come once a week. And by and large, I confess it, the dustbin people come. I put it out. I don't stop in my work to say hello. They don't stop in their work to say hello. We stop now,
Yes.
and we talk to each other at distance. And what you do is you learn about these are the people who come and do it every day. Without them, where would we be? It's this sort of thing. It's this. My godmother said something once to me before she died. Lovely lady she was, Scottish. Came from Aberdeenshire and spoke very, very quietly.
Like Mrs.
And,
Doubtfire.
it was wonderful. Yes. And she said this wonderful thing to me. I think it was almost the last time I saw her. I was leaving her flat in Edinburgh. And she always used to take me, had really bony hands, and she'd shaky hands, and she'd take me by the hand, and she'd grip me as tight as she could. And she said, I want you to remember one thing, Mark. Everyone matters.
Hello, I'm Chastita, and I would like to know what's your favourite book and what's your favourite animal, please. Thank you.
This is Harry and this is Doug the Pug. And what is your favourite animal?
My favourite animal is an elephant. It is, of course, their enormous size and the sound that they make and the way they walk. And if you look at an elephant's eye, and I did so when I was little, I remember, at London Zoo, I looked at an elephant's eye for the first time. And I just felt this huge person with a trunk looking back at me with eyes that were full of wisdom and understanding and gentleness, provided you respected her. And I've loved elephants ever since, and I've written several stories about elephants. One is called Elephant in the Garden, and one is called Running Wild. The Running Wild one was interesting because, again, that came from Bella, from a true story. You may not remember, but I think it was in 2004. But you won't remember, you're too young. In 2004, there was a tsunami. A huge wave came in to a place called Sri Lanka and in other parts of the world. Killed many, many people. 300,000 people were drowned there, I think. Anyway, the true story, which again I found out from someone who told me, or a newspaper, and it's true, is that an English girl with her family were on a beach on Boxing Day when this wave was out there in the ocean. No one knew it was coming, of course, and they were just having a day by the beach on Boxing Day. And the son had bothered the mother all the time. I want to go on an elephant ride. I want to go on an elephant ride. And there was an elephant going up and down the beach, and you paid someone, you got on. And she kept saying, no, 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 no. And eventually she weakened, and the boy got an elephant ride, and off he went with a handler down the beach. And it was, miles along this beach, and it went on and on and on. And at a certain point, I don't know, a mile away, 2 miles away, I don't know, the elephant suddenly felt something and started trumpeting and pulling away before anyone had noticed it, any human being noticed it. She felt something was coming in and you had to get away. And she pulled away from the handler, and with the boy still on top, charged up the beach and into the forest, into the jungle, and just kept going and going and going and going. Behind her, this huge wave was building up and building up and building up. And then it came, the extraordinary thing happened. The sea got sucked away, sucked away, sucked away, sucked away. And all the kids, Sri Lankan kids, went running out to pick up the flapping fish. And then the wave came in, and the destruction was terrible. By which time the elephant and the boy were miles away and safe. And eventually the boy was reunited with the family who had survived. And I thought that was just such a, because after that, it was rather like this pandemic. There's so much harsh stories, so many sad stories. You long for a good story. You really long for a good story. This is the only good story I heard after the tsunami, which was so awful. But to hear a story like that, again, this connection between animal and human beings, that we all share the same planet and the same dangers and all the rest of it. And I thought, yeah, tell a story about it. And that is really at the heart of Running Wild. It's about, in a way, if you've known, there's a book written by Rudyard Kipling called The Jungle Book. And you've probably heard of it or seen the film or something. This is a modern day Jungle Book. It's about a boy and an elephant in the middle of a jungle. And it's about how they survive. And it's called Running Wild. And it's totally brilliant.
You know, I was filming last week in Cirencester, and it was so emotional to see everyone stepping outside the doors at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night to applaud the NHS and the key workers. And it's something so simple. But one of the things that I would advocate for is, why can't we carry that on? Why can't we carry it on?
That is what we've got to do. I mean, this business of it is a question that it's no good politicians telling us we've all got to sort of get together. We don't want to be told by anyone. We need to feel it.
Yes.
And what's happening at the moment is that people are feeling it. You know, sometimes for the first time in our lives, we are being made to think about this. And I think at the heart of it, there is this thing that this thing is happening to us all. Yes, it's affecting some people worse than others, no question about that. But it's affecting all of us. We're absolutely in this thing together. There's no escaping whether you're rich or you're poor. This thing can get you. Whether you're old or you're young, this thing can get you. Yes, there are more people at risk, that's for sure. We mustn't forget that. And that's the kind of thing that's got to be put right afterwards, that we never just think, well, care homes take care of our old people, and sort of forget about them. Or think that the people who teach our children they're quite important, but not that important. And the nurses and the doctors, we mustn't go back to the point of thinking, well, they're just being greedy for asking more money. These are the people who give us enormous value to our lives. And it applies to theatre the same, Yes, film stars get whacks of money, we know all that. But actually, I've been concerned, and you've been concerned, with working with actors who are living on a pittance, working very hard to live on a pittance, giving their life and soul to whatever it is that they're doing. And this can be in a ward in a hospital, it could be on a stage, it doesn't matter where it is. It's the lives of people that matter. And finally, we're not more important than each other. And we've got to share the cake, and there is going to be cake. Doesn't seem like much of it now, but there's going to be cake. We have to share it more equitably. We have to feel more engaged and not to feel put upon. I think this business of feeling put upon has really got to stop. I mean, if you think of the end of the Second World War, we've just done VE Day, flags and that stuff. Well, the flags aren't important. What's really important was what the people did to stay true to themselves and to win through. That's important. They didn't do it for the flag. They did it because of the person living next door, or because the person who was away at the war. For each other, they did it and kept themselves going, and for freedom and for democracy, all that sort of thing. But when it was over, when that war was over, and as it was finishing, all the great things of our life, these people determined should happen. So when we got out of the war, or in our case, the pandemic, there's a world worth living in for our children.
Absolutely.
So that's why the 1944 Education Act happened just before the end of the war. All our children are going to be educated properly. And the National Health Service came along in 1947. And the United Nations were there in 1945. There was this terrific drive to make the world a fitter place. And that's what we've got to do. Yes, they failed in all sorts of ways, but they tried. They really tried hard to change the world. And for the soldiers coming home, that was something worth fighting for, And I think that's what we've got to do. We're going to come through this thing together. There will be some who will not make it to the end, just as they were in the war. There's so many similarities, really. I mean, the one thing that touches me enormously is when you hear about people dying alone now in hospitals today.
Yes.
And they want to see their mum, or they want to see their son or their grandchild. And they can't. Well, it's exactly the same for a soldier wounded in some hospital in the field and dying. What does that soldier want? Mum, dad. It's those things that we've got to remember. People are living through a hellish time, and there's deep, deep sadness. And what I'm sure of is we have to grow out of that sadness, and we have to plant new seeds and flourish. Not because these people have given their lives. They didn't give their lives. They've had their lives taken from them by this wretched disease. as it was with the war. It's not a matter of giving your life. It's a matter of learning from that sadness to make a better world. And that's really what we must do. No, Luke, I don't really have plans to adapt any of my things. I go to the people who are good at adapting, whether it's plays or musicals or films, which I love, incidentally. All that way of telling stories I really love. And I really love it when the books get picked up by a wonderful theatre like the Barn Theatre, and then they get taken on to another way of being. So when the Butterfly Lion was shown last year, was played on the Barn stage last year, and I went to see it. Yes, it was my story originally, but it had been taken and tweaked and new light shone on it. And I love that. I love it when you can take a story and sing it differently. And that's happened with play after play after play. And I love theatre because it's live. That's what's really good about theatre. But I also like film because it's exciting in the same way. It's never the same as the book that you wrote. So I wrote a book many years ago, 25, 30 years ago, called Waiting for Anya, which has just been made into a film, and it comes out on DVD in June. I've seen it already and think it's great. I love it. It was actually filmed in the very place that I visited, was the inspiration to my story. So I like it all. Musicals, yeah, lovely. I'd like a musical. That would be really good. Do it for me.
I would love to know what it is like for you seeing your shows, seeing your books, adapted into shows, into films. I would just love to know what that process is like for you, handing over the reins creatively over to someone else. What's the ups and the downsides of that?
Well, yeah, let's do the downside and get it over with. When it's disappointing, it's very difficult to sit through because someone has taken your story and they have not done it justice in the sense that it has. I like the story not to be the same. I don't want it replicated on stage. That's not what a play is. A play is a play, a film is a film, a book is a book. And when someone imaginative and really talented has got hold of it and taken it and made it their own stage play, that's what I really love. And I've sat through plenty that I don't like, and it's not very pleasant. You just want to leave. I sat through quite a few films, I would say more films than plays, which I haven't enjoyed all that much. But when it works, it is terrific, because suddenly, for the first time, you are sitting there with literally hundreds, sometimes thousands of people watching your story. And when it's good, you don't feel proud. You just feel, oh, it's wonderful that this has come out of it, really. And it's completely unexpected. It's unplanned. It's really good chance that you found the right theatre company, like the Barn, the right director, the right actors, as you know, are rather important, and the right crew. Everything has to be right, the right design, the right music. And I know how complex and difficult theatre is. It's much more complex than writing. I just got up from my bed. I sit there with a sort of pen and scribble. That's it. That's my technology. I need nothing else at all. I just need my imagination, my brain. That's all I need. You people, you need all this support system around you, and you're part of that support system. Yeah? Everyone is supporting everyone else. And I love that. So when it's good, it is the greatest joy.
I almost feel like this period of time is going to be on the syllabus of the A-level history courses in about 50 years' time. And it got me thinking that you have always set some of your stories, not always, but set stories to these big events in history, with the Butterfly Lion, War Horse, the Mozart question, which we're currently working on together. The thought that came into my head was, is this a chance to, with all those things you're talking about there, to set a story to the backdrop of what is currently happening? Is there a story that's going through the brain at the moment that you might be able to write?
I think it's difficult because when you're going through the thing and you're so engaged with every day and what you're doing every day, it's quite difficult to step back and take a look at it from that point of view. But I think it's very likely. I mean, for instance, 20, 25 years ago, we had the foot and mouth disease here in many parts of the country. It was very, very bad here in Devon, and we had to shut down our project, Farms for City Children, for 9 months then, as I've said. And the difference was, with that crisis, I could look out of my window here, and I live in a paradise. It's the most beautiful place you could possibly imagine. I look out of the window, And what do I see? I see black smoke drifting down the Ottoman Valley from the bodies of cows burning in the field. So I was looking at hell in this landscape. And I did write a book then called Out of the Ashes, which is about a family living down the road here, where the animals caught the disease and they all had to be put down, and the effect of that on that family, on the father, the farmer particularly, on the mother who was trying to hold it all together, and the little girl. And it's a story really about how she tries to do something about it. She's been raising a lamb on the bottle, an orphan lamb. And she knows that these people in the white coats are going to find every animal. So she hides the lamb. And it's a story of what happens when she hides the lamb. It's not an easy story. It wasn't an easy time. So I may well do this or not. At the present moment, I can't think of anything I'd like to do less. Josh, hello. It's Michael here, rubbing his eyes. There's 2 or 3 things I can think of. I'm not very good at answering this kind of question, but I've got some ideas. The first thing is that I was a child once. This may surprise you, but I was a child once, and I remember. So I write about the child in me often, and I've been a father and a grandfather and a great-grandfather, and I've been a teacher, and I've worked with children all my life. So I don't like all children. Don't get me right. They're no better than adults, but because that's what they are, little adults. But I am inspired by them because children see things for the first time. They've got wide eyes and they've got their antennae out to catch everything that's out there in the world. And I love that aliveness about young people. So the connection I have to children is very, very important to me. So at the heart of most of my stories, there is a child, that's for sure. Not all, but most. And I think the reason may be that older people also like the stories is because they are very often historical. They're telling stories of times that these other people are familiar with, older people are familiar with. And of course, now as I get older, I am writing more and more involving old people in my stories because I now fully understand what it is to be old. And I like it in many ways because I like the companionship you build up over your life and the friends that you make. There are all sorts of wonderful things like that. You stop the struggle to try and be this or try and be something that you're not. You just get up and do what you do. And you can relax a bit into being old. And just at the moment, that's quite good because we're all sitting here through this very, very dark and difficult time. And I have got, because I'm older, I've got a historical perspective. I know perfectly well the cottage I'm sitting in, you can see me in now, has seen other pestilence, other plagues, other pandemics through the ages. It's a very old cottage, hundreds and hundreds of years. And actually what we're going through is no different now from what our forebears went through time and time and time again. We just thought it would never happen again. That's the situation. Yeah, so that's, it probably appeals to old people and young people, and I hope to people in the middle, parents, because parents like to read stories they like themselves. So when they're sitting down and reading a story, it's really important they can enjoy it. So the Butterfly Lion or the Mozart Question, if they've read it, and after all, there's both quite serious stories, very serious stories in one case, and they both involve war, and they both involve suffering and grieving and all that sort of thing. Well, parents get that, and parents understand it. So maybe that's the reason that the books are read, I hope, by I suppose, across the generations. And I like that. I remember going to the theatre, and theatre's good at that. I'm going to point the finger back at you people. I know I'm going on. But when you open your doors at the Barn Theatre, or whether it's the National Theatre or wherever it is, you don't know who's going to walk in and sit down. And in my case, it's very often families. It's people of 80 to about 8. And everyone is enjoying a story together. And I love that they're sitting down there, and they all bring their own lives to the story, and they make of it what they can. So I do love, that's a very good question. I didn't know it was such a good question when you asked it, but it was.
My name's Abigail Matthews and I played Bertie's mum in The Butterfly Lion at the Barn Theatre. Michael's story is just beautiful, and I have the great privilege of performing in that and in Warhorse as well. So yeah, I have a great love for all of Michael's stories and the humanity and empathy within them. And I think it's very important at this time as well for young people and people of all ages to keep reading whilst in isolation. And allow that sense of escapism and learning as well. Have a great admiration for you, Michael. So thank you for all you do and all you give to people through your stories. It's very, very important, especially now. Thank you. Take care.
Well, thank you, Abigail. It's very sweet of you to say so, and I agree with you. Just at the moment, I think stories are really important to us, whether we are a grown-up child or a child. I think what we want to do now is to, in a way, live out of our skin, go to places we've never been before, meet people we've never been before, find out and discover all we can about the real world outside your window. That's important. You know, for the first time, people are really looking hard and listening hard to birds in the sky, and we're noticing how clean the sky is and how fresh the air is. We're noticing all these things, and that's good. That's the good side of it. And when it comes to books, what you can do is to live away for a few hours from the anxiety and fear and sometimes frustration of living altogether. You're on your own. You're on your own in this story and living it. And I think it's very good for us, very good for our well-being. It's also very good because it really is part of our growing, whether we are children or grown-ups. We grow when we read, we learn more, we understand more. And when you're lost in a book, I just find it's or film or stage play, which you can't do at the moment, any of those things really. It's books that have, and I know people are reading much, much more. My publishers tell me the books are out there, and people are not just buying, they're reading them. The great thing is they're reading and being read to. I love that. I think books have found their moment, actually. I do know someone who is living in this situation all his life. In fact, he's been to your theatre. Is a young lad called Jonathan Bryan. And Jonathan Bryan is, I think he's about 15. And he is a locked-in child. He lies there. He is looked after 24 hours a day. He's the most extraordinary child. He writes books by blinking his eyes and making letters, and then has someone to write. And he's written a book, a published book. And he's a remarkable child. But he's been locked in all his life. All his life, he can't go out and see people. And I'm thinking that for him, we've almost joined his world in a way. We're all locked in like he is. And he is unspeakably brave and thoughtful about it all, which is what we've got to be. So it occurs to me there are going to be stories, but that is a story that I think Jonathan should write himself. He's a pretty good writer.
I'd love to see his work. That'd be amazing.
Oh, terrific. His first book was called I Can Write, E-Y-E, Can Write, because he does this thing. He lies there and he blinks at a card with the letters on it, and his mum spells out the words, someone else writes it down, and he'd written books, he writes poems. It's just remarkable. But it's a great lesson, yes, in courage, in faith, determination, all these things which we've got to have. And it's just a wonderful example to have someone like that. It is interesting, isn't it, how the young teach us. You know, I'm conscious of that with the environment at the moment. A wonderful girl from Sweden who opens our eyes to possibilities, you know, and refreshes us, helps to think. We're helped by the freshness of their look, because they're doing it immediately. They mean every word of what they say and what they write. And I just feel we can learn an awful lot. We learn what we've done wrong and what the hope might be for the future, because the children are our hope, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I think the brilliance of the team that we have here at the barn is, you know, I'm 31 and I'm the oldest member of the team practically after a few. So
you're 31, Ewan.
I am
31.
I am.
Oh, yeah. I thought I'm 32. I'm just slightly. I'm definitely your senior. Just watch it.
I thought you were a little bit younger than me, but it's. Michael, the works that you have created that have become prolific theatrical titles, and the one that you're probably sick to death of hearing about it, but you wrote it, so it's your own fault. Warhorse, you know that has. it must be so incredible to see where that has gone from where it started. And I can imagine that you were, where were you living, where you are now when you were writing that?
Yeah, it was. It's all about here.
Well,
Joey,
yeah,
the horse. Yeah, Joey grew up on the farm I'm speaking to you from now. And in my mind's eye, that's where he lived. It's where Albert, his young friend on the farm boy, grew up with him. And they went off to the war together, well, not together, separately, to find each other. And yes, it all starts from here. And so it's all set in this village, in the church. It's in the village, in the pub, the bell ringing, and the village hall and the school. It's set here. I tend to focus my stories on places I know very well. They're not imaginary. I don't know that I've got much of an imagination, actually. There are many writers who know wonderful people like Philip Pullman, who can really create whole worlds and other worlds within those worlds. And I don't do that, really. I tend to start from what is there and grow the story out of the landscape around me, in that case, out of the history of the First World War, out of the history of the soldiers who went from tiny little places like this, 7 of whom are remembered in our graveyard up at St. James's Church in Ilsley. Tiny, tiny place. So 7 men lost was just huge in a place like this. And then you think of the world they left, which is this paradise I told you about, and then to the hell of the trenches or Gallipoli or wherever it was. And you realize just what an extraordinary and dreadful time that was, which of course was followed by a pandemic of 1918, the last huge one like this. So in a way, we've been so lucky. It's one of the reasons I think I write about war. I grew up just after the Second World War in a country which was depressed. There was lots of domestic strife. Society was rocked back on its heels. There was no money. There was rationing. It was a grey, gloomy place. And I grew up in London. We played in bomb sites. That was the landscape of my world then. Hello, Chloe. I don't know if you've read a book of mine called Kensuke's Kingdom. It's a book I love a great deal. It's about a small boy who falls off a yacht. Don't ask me why. He's on a yacht in the Coral Sea with his mum and his dad and his dog. And he and the dog and the football fall overboard one night, and he finds himself washed up on an island in the Coral Sea. He thinks he's alone. He's starving. He can't find water. And he wakes up in the morning and he finds there's a plate outside the cave where he's hiding away with some fish on it and some fruit on it. So he knows someone else is on the island. And it turns out that there's this, he meets him later, this Japanese sailor left behind from the Second World War. He's a very, very old man, and in a way, a sort of ancient Japanese warrior meeting a boy of today. That's really what the story's about. How this man is called Kensuke. He's lived there for 27 years by the time the boy gets there, 27 years. And it's a true story. There was such a Japanese person left on an island. And he lived there for 27 years on his own. And Mike Kensuke in the story does that. And he learns to live with, in harmony with nature, working with orangutans, looking after them, in some cases saving them, and in harmony with everything around him. And that appeals to me a lot. Right now, Kensuke is my hero.
Michael, having filmed Poldark for 5 seasons in Cornwall, I'm fascinated to know about your relationship with the county. Is it a favourite place with special personal memories? And why did you set some of your stories there?
Cornwall. I go to the Isles of Scilly. Have been every year now for 45 years. This is the first year I'm not able to go. I'm heartbroken. I should be there actually right now on Scilly for our fortnight. I've written book after book after book about Scilly, why the whales came and the wreck of the Zanzibar, all sorts of things to listen to the moon. And I go to Cornwall, the White Horse of Zennor. Cornwall's been big as far as I'm concerned. It's my second home in England. I had a place in Zennor near St Ives for a bit. I love the landscape. Of course, I love the sea. And then most of all, I love the stories that come out of the place. It's interesting, Cornwall, compared to Devon. I live in the heart of Devon, miles away from the seashore. The difference between Devon and Cornwall, I'm not going into landscape, I'm going into stories. Cornish stories mostly, not all, but mostly happen around the sea. It's boats, it's wrecks, it's pirates, it's this sort of thing. And I love all that. And because I've been there, and I know for instance, on the Isles of Scilly, I don't know how many hundreds of wrecks there are around there. And they're all, when you go across the water, you know they're underneath, they're down there. And the people who live there know the stories of Scilly and of Cornwall. So that's why I love it. The place is absolutely full of stories. Under every rock, under every piece of seaweed, there's a story. And so I'm missing it this. I really am missing. It's a sort of fix I have going to Cornwall. And congratulations, by the way, on Poldark. I think it's brought an awful lot of people to Cornwall. And I don't say that lightly. I think it's wonderful that people go to Cornwall to look for a story like Poldark. So I grew up, if you like, with all these visions around me and ideas around me about the damage that war does. So it has become an obsession. I've written lots of books which are not about the war. But if you think of the Mozart question, which I hope we're going to do next year when we all get going again.
We will.
It's about the Holocaust. Well, the Holocaust was all part of that war. This was the evil that we were trying to defeat and did defeat in the end, but at what cost? And we just must not forget the cost. And there's no more terrible example of that cost than the Holocaust. And it's a story about it, but it's also a story about music and the power of music to keep us going. It's about a group of musicians who were obliged to play in the camps, which did happen, and about how that is thought of now. And it's a story that's very close to my heart. It's not normally the kind of subject you'd think would write a book and have it illustrated for children to read. But actually, the thing about children one must remember, I think, is that you must never patronize them. They know sadness, they know grief, and they're getting intimations of wickedness all around them. They know perfectly well that there are people who do terrible things, and they're not just the old stories of witches and ghouls. They know this is out there, and they should. They should. It's how you grow up. You grow up learning the great and good things about this world. That's very, very important, and the hope in this world, but also the dangers. And so you must look them in the eye, and you tell them the story as it was, not to horrify them, not to pour that stuff on, which we see about the Holocaust, but the people, the individual people. Why is Anne Frank so important to us all? Because we get to know her in her diary. And we get to know what she lived through, her shut down, if you like, but with an extra terror. The extra terror was being betrayed, and of course what happened to her. And finally her death in Bergen-Belsen, which isn't recorded in her diaries, but we know about it. She told her tale in that diary. And it is through her, through one person, not 6 million. You can't, when you think of 6 million, or you think of the 20 million dead, or whatever it is, 40 million in the second one, the figures mean nothing. It's like today. And it's not an invalid comparison. We are being told each day it's like a sort of it's like a football match, just football match score. How many people have died today? And then tell us it's 600 or 400. It's not. It's one person at a time, and these people had their lives, had their being, had their families. And the minute you start making this an amount, it's very easy to lose sight of the fact that these were people. And people known and loved and had their being in exactly the same world that we're living in.
And it's even worse when you see it as a graph or something like that. I can't deal with that when we're a graph's been shoved in front of our face, and you're thinking every single one of those dots is a family, is a brother, is a mother, is a sister, is a grandparent. You should never be able to get numb to that, but you do when it's just shoved in your face constantly by the media.
And neither do I want to be led in my sadness by politicians of one party or the other. And I feel one of the things we're doing so wrong at the moment is that when it came to wartime, people got together in a government. We need a government that is all together. We need everyone in this country who is represented in their thinking by Labour or Green or Tory or Liberal Democrat. They all need to be around the table. We're all going through this stuff. At the present moment, it's being politically led. And the flag is there. What on earth is the flag doing? When they're telling these stories of each day and all the rest of it. This is not about the flag. This is a worldwide pandemic, we should be thinking, yes, of course, we've got to think of our own grandma and grandpa and the village down the road and the town down the road and of England or Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland. Yeah, we've got to think of those people. But we've also got to be thinking of South Korea and China and Africa, places we've never been to, we know little about, but they're suffering just the same as we are. And to me, to stick a flag there is simply, I don't know, it just feels wrong, completely wrong. You know, there should be a United Nations flag would be really good. I'd like to see a flag behind whoever is coming and giving this announcement each day. My wish was a scientist and not a politician, but I don't mind really who it is so much as that we don't somehow see it as a sort of, we're actually behind Italy or ahead of Spain, and there's our flag.
Yeah.
What the heck's all that about?
It feels to me that it's almost become a competition between nations to see who can win the coronavirus pandemic. And, you know, I know we're missing the Euros in the football this summer, but to be honest, I just think that the coming together of nations to try and solve this problem collectively is the only way we win on this.
Absolutely. And I just wish, and I think it'll happen. I do think it'll happen. Because I think when this is over and the reckoning is done about what a terrible time it has been, everyone all over the world will realize that if we're going to get the science together and the people together, we are going to have to get together, and we're going to have to bury the differences which we have with every other country in the world. We've got some little squabble and they've got some squabble with us, that's for sure. But you bury those things and you work together for the common good. This is a common good thing. It's not about us. It's about everyone. And that's why I think the flag is inappropriate. And I know people would object to that, but there's a time for flags. Flags were important on VE Day. Of course they were. But then it was important to have a flag then also of America and of Russia and all the people involved in it. I think that we tend always to look at ourselves. Well, Phoebe, of course I'm pleased. It's lovely because you don't expect a book to roar away like that and be known around the place. I have to say it wasn't a book that was known. It comes back almost to the previous question. The reason that Warhorse became known was the play done by the National Theatre, which has been on now for I don't know how many years, ever since, I don't know, was it 12, 13 years or something like that, and it's shown to about 8 million people around the world. Well, the book never did that. The book hardly sold at all. It was the play that did that, and then someone made a film of it, and then it became very popular because he was Spielberg, and he made a pretty cracking, epic film of it, and that got shown around the world, and suddenly this book, which wasn't selling any copies at all, was a bestseller. Well, it's all a happy accident. You can't arrange these things. It's just... And it is good when I go to other places and people say they've read Warhorse and they've loved Warhorse and it's become something special in their lives. Which is not arrangeable. You don't sit down and think, I'm going to write, at least I don't, I'm going to write a bestseller. You just tell a story.
I wanted to ask Michael, so in many of your books, including The Butterfly Lion, you use World War I as a major element of the story. And my question is, why World War I? What is it about World War I in particular, as opposed to other wars that occurred even in the 20th century? And why, furthermore, why do you use war as a device in so many of your books?
It's a good question, and it's a searching question, so I'll be very thoughtful about it if I can. The truth is I don't use war in books. I hope I don't. And I didn't choose the First World War. The First World War happened by accident. I've written about the Second World War. I've written about the Holocaust, and I've written about Afghanistan. I've written about the Spanish Civil War. I've written about the French Resistance. It's conflict and man's inhumanity to man has been part of my life. It's not something I use. It's something that is part of who I am. And I think when you're a writer, you have to write about what you believe in, what you care about. What do I care about? I don't care about war at all. I care about peace. And the point of every single story I've written is that there's an element of reconciliation at the heart of it. Do you have a dragon for a saint or something? What's your problem? So you've got St. David as yours. Why she should be...
Well, if we had just a picture of David, I don't think it'd be quite as dramatic.
But what is the dragon? Where does it come from?
There
All I know is
There
Well, I
is
know
there
this
is
is
a
saying
legend. I was told a story which is probably wrong, but there was England had a white dragon and Wales had a red dragon, and they fought, and the red dragon won. That's what I was told as a kid. That might have just been a primary school fable, but I'm going to stick with it. Maybe it's something that you should write next. Have you ever written about dragons?
Yes, I have. No, I have. I did one not long ago. And that particular dragon was green, as dragons should be, really. It's a sort of camouflage thing. So a red dragon could be seen. It's sort of dodgy. But then you've got the leek as well. But symbols are important, you know.
They are.
And
they are.
they're very important. And language. I mean, we can joke about it, but it's really, really important to think about language. And I don't wish to say this, but I think Welsh people speak English very beautifully. I love hearing Welsh people speaking English. I don't know quite why. There's a rhythm to the language that very often isn't there. And this is because I think it's there in your own language. And of course, the downside of English being spoken everywhere is that sometimes it's crushed other languages. And I know we did that. I tried to do that in Wales and tried to do it in Scotland and Ireland. And I'm very pleased it didn't succeed. Sometimes I think, and I can sit here in Devon as an English person and say this, is that I think we did you people a favour, and the Scots a favour, in the sense that we were deeply unpleasant and oppressive and tried to stop you speaking your own language. Well, you try to stop a Welshman doing anything he wants to do, or a Welsh woman, and you won't succeed. And you thought, well, hell with that, I'm going to speak my own language, I'm going to sing my own songs, I'm going to write my own poems. And I'd say your literary connection is much stronger in Wales. Your song connection is much stronger in Wales. It's the same in Scotland. It's the same in Ireland. It's about looking and listening and feeling, looking at the world around you. That's what feeds your imagination anyway. It is the world around you, the people you know and the places you know and what you hear in terms of what people say and the music of the world. So that's what it is. It's looking and listening, drinking it all in. And every writer does that. You spend your life, and you're 9 now, I'm 77. But I'm still drinking in the world. I just told you the story of the blackbird. And I'm still connected to this world about me. And that's where the stories come from. They come from a horse in a field. They come from an elephant that I heard about in Sri Lanka. They'll come from anything that I've heard about or seen, been told about, and it triggers something. And then I start telling my tale.
Hello, Michael. It's lovely to be able to ask you a question. Like countless others, I absolutely adored Warhorse, and I was wondering, how hard was it for you to hand over control of your creation to someone else, whether it be for film or theatre? And the flip side of that question is, did you learn anything new about your own work from seeing it through other people's eyes, whether it be film or theatre? Thanks very much.
Films and theatre. Well, I'm looking into the face of someone who does this sort of thing, so I better talk carefully. I think, thank you for your question. I think for me, the key is before you agree to have one of your stories turned into a play or into a film, is to know the work of the people who are going to do it. It's really all, it's all about that. It's about trust, because in the end, you don't have to do this. You have a choice. And the choice is, do you sign the contract and take the money, or don't you? Simple as that. So you have to have seen their work, heard about their work, have it recommended to you, and then you go into it then with some confidence. I would say half the time it's a disappointment. You sit there because, and it seems to be prosaic and doesn't really lift the book on. What I love, and this is the second part of your question, in a way, is when a director, a writer, actors, and the crew take it into a different place. They make a play of the book so that the book can be forgotten. And in a way, that's what I've got to do. When I go and sit down there and I see it, I want to see a play. I don't want to see a faithful interpretation of my story. Sometimes, this is a lesson I've learned over the years. I used to like it when it was exactly the same and I used to judge the play that way, which is completely wrong. I think Warhorse the play taught me this, really.
And how almost out of that we're getting these political differences which aren't pushing towards solving the problems that we need to solve right now. It is interesting how you've always centred the majority, I'd say, of your books around animals. Is there something in that there's something within the souls of animals that is different to write about than humans?
I think there's a sort of pragmatic reason why I write about animals quite as much as I do. I loved animals when I was little. I had a goldfish called Swimsy, very original name, Swimsy. And Swimsy, it's a story of tragedy, the whole thing, really. Swimsy I won at a village fete. And we had a round bowl which came with it when I won it. And I took it home and we kept it for about a year. And then one day I found it floating upside down in its bowl. And I was 6, 7. And I remember burying it, and it was the worst day of my life. It was just terrible. I loved this fish. I used to spend a lot of time with my nose glued to this little bowl and talking to this fish. It meant a lot. I know it sounds silly, but it meant a lot. So I had some sort of connection to this creature. It wasn't just a fish. It really meant something to me to have another life, another creature I could talk to sometimes. And then later on, joy oh joy, my parents decided to get a dog when we moved to the countryside from London. And it's called Prin. It's a very beautiful golden retriever. We loved it. It was a terrible thief and would never do what it was told and kept running off and really disobedient. Yeah, and of course it's exactly the kind of dog that children love. And he was a really good companion. And then I came home from school one day and they'd given the dog away because the dog, Prin, was too disobedient and would run off and had chased this and had chased that. And we couldn't keep it. So I had early on, if I'm looking now for excuses for writing about animals, I had this love of animals very, very early on. And also when I was living in Essex, where this thing happened in a place called Bradwell on the Essex coast. It was my first connection with wildlife. We were very close to the sea. So my brother Peter and I used to take our bikes and ride along past the American Air Force Base, as well as past the school, past a wonderful Saxon chapel called St. Peter's. And we come to the sea wall. Then we get off our bikes because it was too windy and you get blown off if you tried to cycle along. And we push our bikes all the way along to Bradwell Quay along the sea wall. And from there, I'd see hares, I'd see kestrels, I'd see all the seabirds. I saw an otter once that I remember, and deer. And I had some sense of this whole world out there, which I'd never really understood and known about in London. And I think that gave me, if you like, a love of nature and a connection. The most important thing is I felt I belonged in this world, which is why when we came down here to Devon, we started Farms for City Children, because I discovered it quite young. My wife, Claire, had done her discovering of nature long before I met her down here, where we live in the very village we're in. She used to come down here aged 7. Actually, it was interesting. I think she was quite a vigorous child. And I think her parents quite liked her going away for holidays. And they knew someone who kept a pub in this village, a Mrs. Rafferty, who kept the Duke of York in Italy. And so Claire was sent there for 2 weeks on holiday to get her out of the way, because she was a nuisance. And what Claire discovered, age 7, I think, was that there was this whole countryside place out there. She was a suburban girl, and she put on her wellies, and the Mrs. Rafferty would want to get rid of her too during the day because she was a nuisance around the pub. So she would just go for walks. And of course, you could in those days. We're talking about late 40s, early 50s. And she'd walk, and she'd walk, and she'd meet farmers, and she'd walk through the churchyard, and she'd see slowworms, and she'd see hedgehogs, and she'd look up, and she'd see buzzards and swallows. And this whole world meant so much to her. And she came, I think, for 6, 7 years. Every single holiday she'd come down and be in this place and walk the lanes. And she knew the horses, and she knew the cows and the calves and the lives of the people who were really friendly to her. And that's why when we got older and both as teachers decided to set up Farms for City Children, we came here because this was her place of dreams. My place of dreams is in Bradwell, in Essex. But I can't live there because she made me come and live here. But it was a good idea. I'm very happy with it. But if you're asking what's behind the stories, it is that connection with the countryside. But the point is, it's the connection. It's not the creatures themselves.
Yeah.
It's always about the relationship between them and us. And I'm really connected to that in a way that I think a way I've never been how shall I say, I've never got over that. It's always been, in a way, it's my passion, and it was my passion and Claire's passion too, to enable these children to feel that same connection, that this is their place, this is the world they belong to. It's theirs to love, and it's theirs to look after. I wrote a sort of prose poem about this, which I'd love to read to you. Have we got time?
Yes, yeah, I'd love to hear it.
The Man Who Planted Trees, which is a story about an old man who plants some acorns on an arid sort of high place in the south of France and grows during his lifetime a forest. And I think it's a wonderful parable for our times. So The Man Who Planted Trees by Jean Journeau, and I wish I'd written it myself.
Okay, so we're on to our adults now. And these are people you may know. This is from Rihanna, cast of Warhorse. Why do you love cameo?
Yes.
Yeah. She asks, why do you love cameo appearances so much?
Rihanna, how nice to speak to you like this. This is very funny. Why? Vanity, 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 I expect. No, I should have been, well, you know this, I should have been an actor, Rihanna. I love being with actors, that's for sure. I love the making of plays. You know I like stories. And I love making stories come alive. You've been all part of that. And when there is a play, I just love to feel a tiny bit engaged and involved with it. I don't necessarily write my own stage plays or screenplays, but I do like to have little, but I wouldn't call them cameos. Cameos is where actually someone takes some notice of you. Basically what happens is that I hide myself away, as you know perfectly well, and I hide myself away amongst other people so that really no one can see me. And as you know, with Warhorse, they gave me finally, after 7 appearances, they gave me a line because I was fed up with just standing there and singing a couple of songs. And someone really sweetly said, well, you can join in the auction scene. I said, what am I going to say? So what about 15 guineas? Could you remember 15 guineas, Michael? So that is my big line in Warhorse, 15 guineas. So I love it. But it's actually, I love to be a part for an evening of the camaraderie of actors. And I think it's the most extraordinary thing you do. You create magic on the stage. And I wish I teaching it. I was a junior school teacher for many years, about 8 years at the coalface of teaching, which I loved. I loved it in the classroom anyway. I wasn't too keen in the staff room, but I really loved the classroom. And I came to know with children that the way that children love to express themselves was through poems and stories. I hadn't written much until then, but I knew that was a way, in fact, they could get confidence about themselves, to feel they had a voice of their own, either on paper or out loud. And so I would write with them. We'd go out and we'd find some sort of, bird sanctuary. We'd walk through there and I'd tell them all to be silent, silence. I do, don't talk. Just look, breathe it in, breathe it in, breathe it in. And we walk back again, don't talk. And we'd sit down and we'd put it straight down on paper. And so that they would come from there, from what they'd seen, whatever it was. And then they'd write down their impression of it, what they felt about it. And while they did it, I would do the same. And in a way, I kind of learnt my writing through teaching children. And then they'd read out their stories or their poems. And I'd do the same. It was important for them that I did. Amelia, I got that from a story I read in a newspaper many, many years ago now about a dog. And it was in Afghanistan. And it was one of those dogs which the army used. It was the Australian army, actually. They were there, and the British were there, the Americans there, but this was an Australian dog with an Australian group of soldiers. And this dog was used for sniffing out bombs at the side of the road. They were trained to sniff these bombs out. So when they went out on patrols, someone would go ahead with these dogs and they'd sniff out the bombs. And they were really clever at it. And the Taliban, who were the enemy at the time, liked to shoot these dogs because they were really useful, because they were trying to blow up Australian soldiers. And anyway, a patrol went out one day with their dog, and they came under fire. There was a firefight, and they all got down, and they were shooting back and forth. And when it was all over, Australian people were harmed. We don't know about the Taliban, but the dog had disappeared. The dog was not there. Of course, they looked around for a body in case it had been shot. Nothing. And anyway, for weeks and weeks, whenever they came past that place, they'd call for the dog. They'd look for the dog. Nothing. 2 years later, that dog wandered out of the desert up to a British patrol and sort of introduced itself and said, "Have you got me win a lot?" or something like that. And it's a true story.
That's brilliant.
And then I thought, isn't it wonderful that dog spent 2 years out there? Goodness knows, it must have been helped by some children or by families. Otherwise, it wouldn't have survived. But I thought, I'm going to have that dog at the center of this story. And it's really about the terrible war in Afghanistan, but it's also about a refugee family who leave Afghanistan because they've got no home and they come to England, where they are not necessarily so wonderfully treated. Okay, well, I wrote this in a way which illustrates what we were talking about this connection to animals and how important animals are in my life and in all our lives. And I wrote about now. It's really about how I feel at the moment about this pandemic. It's called A Song of Gladness. I've been talking every morning to Blackbird, telling him why we are all so sad at the moment. He sits on his branch and listens. It was Blackbird's idea. He sang out this morning at dawn from his treetop in the garden to Fox, half asleep behind the garden shed. She thought it a good idea too. It was a wake-up call. Fox was on her feet at once and trotting through Bluebell Wood, where she barked it to deer who ran off across the stream. Kingfisher was there, otter and dipper too. They heard and piped it on, and Swallow swooped down over the meadow and passed it on to cows waiting to go into their milking, and to sheep resting quietly under the hedge with her lambs in the corner of the dew-damp field. And they all agreed, bleating it out to bees already busy at their flowers, to weaving spiders and grasshoppers and scurrying mice. Trees heard sheep calling too, the whole flock of them, and waved their budding leaves in wild enthusiasm. And high above, the clouds wandered through the skies, driven by wind, and wind took the blackbird's idea over the cliffs, across heaving seas, where gulls and albatross cried it out, and whales and dolphins and porpoises heard it, and wailed and whooped it down into the deep, where turtles listened, and they too loved the idea. So did plankton, and every fish and crab and sea urchin and whelk. They all whispered that it was a fine notion, the best they ever heard. And the whisper went over the sea on the curling waves to the shores of Africa, where lions roared their approval, and elephants trumpeted it, leopards yawned it, water buffalo belched it, wild dogs yelped it, wildebeest murmured it out across the savannah, and storm lifted the idea over the rainforests, where rain took it and poured it down on gorillas in the mist, on chimpanzees in their sleeping nests. Howler monkeys and gibbons echoed their calls loud over all the earth. They are that loud. And then, from far up high, sun heard it too, and shone it down over deserts where oryx stamped her foot, impatient to be getting on with it and doing it. She loved the idea that much. Even camel, who rarely joined in anything, thought this was the best and most beautiful idea he had ever heard. Back in the garden, Blackbird waited till everyone was ready, and then he began to sing. And the whole carnival of animals, every living thing on this good earth, joined in until the globe echoed with the joy of it. And Blackbird was very pleased, but I was still lost in sadness as I heard the earth singing around me. It was a song of forgiveness. I knew that. So I asked Blackbird if I could join in, and he sang his answer back to me. Why do you think we are doing this, you silly man? We want you and yours to be happy again. Only then will you treat yourselves right. Will you treat us and the world right again, as you know you should? Only then will all be well. Sing, silly man. Sing, sing. Our song is your song. So I sang. We all sang away our sadness. In every house and flat and cottage, we clapped and sang, in every hut and tent, in every palace and hospital and prison. And they heard, and we heard, our song of gladness, echoing all together in glorious harmony across the universe. it does inspire me, but I never sat down and listened to it for that reason. I sit down because I know the composer or I like it before. I do like what I like. I'm very fond of Mozart and Handel and Haydn and Beethoven. Mozart is I grew up with Mozart. He wrote wonderful horn concertos, which my mum used to play on a 78 gramophone. And those masterpieces that he wrote, I love. I really can lose myself in them when they're on, and they are of great comfort. But I think it is the familiarity of it. But I think there's a wonderful piece of music which I can recommend to you. You can Google it up. It's called Farewell to Stromness, and it's a most beautiful piece of music on a piano. It calms your spirit. You just close your eyes, and yes, it's a bit sad, but it's also calming. And I think being calm is really important in these days. So Farewell to Stromness, okay? And why don't you play it on your 15th birthday? And you'll think of all of us singing happy birthday to you afterwards. But please, I think the composer was Peter Maxwell Davis. Peter Maxwell Davis, and it's Farewell to Stromness, set in Orkney, and it's very, very beautiful. It's only 5 minutes of your time, and it'll be the best birthday present you have, promise.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us for this In Conversation with Sir Michael Morpurgo. We cannot wait to welcome you back to the Barn Theatre when all this is over, and I can't wait to that opening night of the Mozart Question.
Me too. I'm looking forward to it hugely. Lovely to see you all alive and kicking up there in Sound System. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, Michael.
Hello. I'm Hilary Harwood, and I played Millie, the old lady who told the story of the butterfly lion to the young Michael. One of the loveliest themes of this book is the relationship between the young and the old. And I'm very pleased that I was the storyteller, because I think that first and foremost, Michael Morpurgo is a magical storyteller. And I think that our version of the book, adapted for the stage by Daniel Buckeroyd and directed by Jess Daniels, really captured the magic of the book. I think that I speak for all of us, cast and creatives, that every performance we felt touched by the magic. The things I loved about the play, I loved the lions, the baby cub of the young lion, created so beautifully by Maya Kirkman Richards. But my favourite was, that moment when the old, or the fully grown lion appeared out of the shadows and into the light with a shake of his iridescent mane. It was extraordinarily moving. It was magical.
Hello to everyone at the barn, Ewan, everyone watching, and of course Michael. I hope you're well. I hope Claire is very well. I have had the pleasure and honour of working on 2 shows that have been adapted from Michael Morpurgo books. I worked on Warhorse for about 19 months before going pretty much straight into working in the Butterfly Lion at the Barn Theatre. Butterfly Lion was a really, really special show for me for a number of reasons, not least because it was my first leading role as an actor, and it was probably one of the most incredible evenings of my life, having Michael there and getting to perform again for him. And strangely, the character in Butterfly Lion is called Michael Morpurgo, so I got to play him whilst he was sat out in the audience, which was kind of amazing. So as I always say, Michael, thank you so much, because you're almost entirely responsible for my acting career thus far. I love Michael Morpurgo's books because they have such generosity. Every single character in them is given a fair shake, and it brings life to so many different kinds of people.
Hi, Michael and Ewan. I hope you guys are doing well. I was just thinking about how last year, this time, we would have just finished doing The Butterfly Lion at the barn. and how wonderful an experience that was for me. You know, that was only the second professional show that I'd ever done. And it was such a blast getting to work with everybody and meet everybody and getting to see Cirencester. Yeah, I hope I can come up again soon. All right, well, thank you for answering my question. Bye, guys. I hope you stay well.
In March 2018, we opened our doors to the public with a vision not just to create challenging professional theatre, but to use this as a platform to inspire and bring communities together. Theatre and culture build identity. With theatre and culture in our local life, the community landscape is more vibrant. Local life is enriched. We believe that the benefits of theatre should be available for everyone. Our Theatre for All programme has removed financial barriers, giving disadvantaged people access to the theatre free of charge.
So we were told that we'd come here and have a Christmas meal and then go and watch A Christmas Carol.
Our aim is to make live professional theatre available to everyone and use that experience for positive change. Theatre can be transformational in young lives. Our academy is now in its 4th year, and we continue to build on our vision of bringing the best performing arts tuition to the heart of the Cotswolds. We work hard to make our academy as inclusive and as accessible as possible. Discounts apply for parents with more than one child. Our bursaries help support talented children from less affluent backgrounds. The Academy creates a fun and challenging environment where children can build friendships and develop key skills not just for theatre, but for life. We are also able to provide real opportunities for students who wish to pursue careers in the arts.
My name is Harry Apps. I am currently playing Marius in Les Miserables in the West End.
Barn outreach and learning programs engage with thousands of people. Our free workshops support the drama curriculum in local schools. Singing and musical theatre workshops in community groups and care homes have helped address issues of isolation. Our Song for Cirencester project in aid of mental health charities brought our community together in an unprecedented way. We've collaborated with many charities in the region, including the Churn Project, to support individuals dealing with the barriers to finding work.
Since working at UN, my life's changed. It's given me some purpose, given me an interest, some confidence I was lacking prior to all this.
The Barn Theatre played a pivotal role in the town's 2018 World War I centenary celebrations. Who could forget our record-breaking Human Poppy? Our live streaming work on the annual Advent Festival helped thousands engage and take part in Cirencester's Christmas festivities. In these times of uncertainty, we strive to keep the community together. The theatre may be temporarily closed, but our commitment to you goes on. Even now, our amazing costume department are helping the NHS by making scrubs for frontline workers. We've used our technology to build a free live streaming service that provides much needed community news and entertainment for all the family, broadcasting every day to keep us all connected. We are not just a theatre. We are the Barn.
Since 1976, Farms for City Children has given over 100,000 children from our inner cities a taste of country life. They now have farms across the UK. But the story began at Nethercott in North Devon when it was bought by the writer Michael Morpurgo and his wife Claire.
City children are the same as any other children. The only difference is the horizons around them. They live in a place where the sky is cut off very often by buildings, where the roads are full of traffic, where concrete and tarmac prevails.
Out of the children who have come, I think maybe 7 or 8 that have ever been to the countryside. Once they got out, they just literally, they were kids again. They were playing, they were laughing, they were giggling. They just wanted to tear out of the coach and take a look all around the grounds and, do we get to play here? And they just couldn't believe the amount of space they would have. And for the week.
I haven't been anywhere like this before. I think it's nice because back in the city, you don't really see grass as fresh as this.
I think it's a great opportunity to have all this space because when we go home, it's going to be all squashed and stuff.
They've been interacting, they've been playing together, they've been involved in activities that involve teamwork. We live in the PlayStation generation. Everything's fast, entertainment's just a click of the fingers away. And a lot of the children, I think, were quite worried and couldn't believe that they were going to spend a week with no TV.
I thought, you got to be kidding me, no telly? Because I like watching telly quite a lot. And then once I got used to Nevercott, I started thinking telly's not important anymore.
Over 100,000 children have been down here, but actually it should be millions. This should be something that happens for every child in this country. It should be absolutely part of their education. It is as important as your maths and your literacy and all these other things.
I think it's important for them to learn about farming because I've learnt in my years of teaching that children are completely unaware about food and where it comes from.
When we talk about the food that's on their plate, a lot of them don't associate chicken with what's running around in the field outside.
Can you not feel her? She's vibrating.
And I think they have more of an appreciation for it.
Yay!
That we write on the blackboard, these potatoes are from the garden, and they talk about, oh, we had the potatoes from the garden today.
Fresh bread, grated cheese, grated cheese, 2 jam tarts.
And they're eating the sausages. They're aware that they've come from a group of pigs that they've been working with throughout the week. They'll talk about, oh yeah, we ate the pig. Is that the pig that was here last year when we came? And they're fine about it.
It's a great opportunity for them to bond and for teamwork and to get stuck in. And certainly for kids that, maybe struggle back at school, it's a great leveller because for all the kids, it's a whole new experience.
This one's calm.
Can you imagine if you come from Bermondsey, in the middle of London, or the centre of Manchester, and you looked out on the scene of Dartmoor for a week, and you've walked these fields, and you've seen buzzards mewing in the air, and you've seen herons lift off the rivers, and you've moved sheep, and you've lambed sheep, and you've seen the milk come out of the cows, and you've done all this stuff. What a difference that makes to your life. Many, many teachers have said to us, you can learn more in a week here than you can in a whole year at school. But it's because it's so different, and I suppose that's why for city children it's so important.
I do the chicken and skunk, chicken and skunk, chicken and skunk, chicken and skunk.